Welcome to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I'm your host today, and today my guest is Chris Brown. Chris, thank you for joining us again.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. We wanted to have Chris here for a couple shows because we have so many areas of things we want to discuss. And this show, we wanted to talk about the stimulus package and how governments get in there and muck around in the markets and cause sometimes good things to happen and sometimes some painful things to happen. So I think the best place to start is with defining inflation and deflation. Those are both things that we've heard we might be facing with the huge debt that's been accumulated. So tell us what those terms look like and what they mean.
Well, the classical definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. That is the demand, and we saw that in the housing bubble, that there were a lot of people who were encouraged to buy houses who may or may not have been qualified to.
Qualified in the old sense of putting some money down on your house.
Having sufficient income and so on. And so they went out and they were looking for houses, and the price kept going up because demand goes up. And so that's the classical definition of inflation. And deflation is what we're going through now in real estate. We're seeing prices lower than many times the mortgage that people have on the houses. That's underwater mortgage. We're seeing people unable to sell their houses because there is no demand. There's nobody out looking for them, or very few people out looking for them. So we're seeing in the housing market some rather hard definitions of inflation. That is what we went through, and deflation, what we're going through now.
And deflation also, it seems to be hitting just regular goods. People just aren't buying anything unless it's on sale. And I think most Americans could probably go 5 years without buying clothes if we had to.
I know I could.
So it's definitely a choice and not a necessity to the extent that we have to purchase something like food. You can only go so long without food.
And that raises an interesting point, because I've noticed just in the past week that the price of gasoline is up about 20 cents a gallon. And that's because of supply and demand factors and so on. But it's a cost that we can't avoid if we're going to drive a car. And so to the extent that that 20 cents a gallon is impacting people's budgets, that's 20 cents that they're not going to spend on something else.
Yeah.
And the same is true of food. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, passed the ethanol mandate, which uses feed corn to make gasoline additive, and it drove up the price of corn.
Which is in a lot of things, we found out.
A lot of things, and it's still going up. Now they want to extend the mandate from 10% to 15%, but they're still dealing with feed grains.
But you know that, I mean, when you really look at it, that is just such a politically opportunist thing that they're doing. Because when we were out in Iowa, those people, people were studying this ethanol business, and it takes a gallon of gasoline to produce, or a gallon of oil to produce a gallon of ethanol. It's a no-gainer. We're not, and it's like we're just appeasing the agricultural belt out there, and that's subsidizing them. And we don't talk about it that much. We talk about how it helps the environment when it's not helping the environment at all. And that's the dishonesty of the argument that really rubs me the wrong way.
Well, but you're talking...
I just had to get it in there.
Well, we're talking about inflation, and
yeah.
And the real bite in inflation right now is the cost of food. You go to the grocery store and you'll see things that were this price and they're now 10% higher or more.
Yeah, well, what's helped them that not be quite as obvious is we don't have labels on our food, so you can't go back and say, I bought this bag of rice for, the sticker's not on there anymore because it's all scanned.
The barcode is
there. The barcode's on there. But I saw it tremendously. It was pulled out an old recipe magazine, cookbook, and they have some prices of how much you'll pay for a pound of cheese and so forth. And I'm thinking, it's not been 229 for a long time.
Yes, that's
And so
right.
that was only 5-6 years ago. So you know that's when it sort of hit. Oh wow,
And
it's a lot higher.
yes, and the sticker shock at the grocery store is getting to be really noticeable. As you say, last week it was this, and this week it's this. It's
Can't get out of there for less than $100, and that's
Yeah.
just 2 people.
That's right. It used to
Yeah.
be a grocery sack meant $5 worth of groceries. That was a long time ago. But there's an example of inflation at work. And this is inflation that hurts because you can't avoid it.
And isn't it a little deceptive because there's only certain goods that they measure when they're measuring the inflation index. They'll choose maybe they'll go from measuring what it costs for a name brand product and they'll give you the generic
Right.
brand.
Yes.
And then they keep playing with the numbers on us to keep us unaware or believing otherwise.
The basket of goods that makes up the index changes. And they split it out, as they say, well, core inflation, X food and fuel. Well, we can't avoid food and fuel. You know, the other things in the basket, maybe you buy potatoes instead of rice or something like that, are not quite so obvious, but food and fuel is certainly sticking out there. So when they say the core rate of inflation is stable, it'll add back food and fuel because it won't be that stable.
Yeah, I think clothing has not gone up as much because you can get it, you can get it on sale,
Yes.
cheaper than
And-
you used to. But then again, that's also because of world trade and free trade markets.
Just look at the price of cotton. You know, the price of cotton is now as high as it was after the Civil War.
Which I guess was pretty high, but I
It was
can't tell
very
you.
high because of the cotton supply was
Yes.
interrupted by the Civil War. But
Yes.
all of this demand from China and India, and here we're using more things made out of cotton, and over there they had some very poor crop results, so that increased the demand. But cotton has just gone through the roof. So there's something we don't use every day, but you go to the store and say, I need to buy some new sheets, you're going to find that the price is a lot higher. And that's just another example of the commodity inflation that's going on. The cotton quality hasn't changed, but the price has changed.
Well, and I think it shows too the world through these trade agreements. It has open markets in other places, and we all know how much we care about the people in the world have a better, are being
Yes.
raised out of poverty. That's very important. And this free trade has allowed that to happen. And so, but it also has created greater demand because now they can afford more things.
Yes.
And so that's a pinch on the products.
And for every action there are consequences, sometimes unintended as we see. And so you say the free trade agreement has caused a lot of people to be displaced from a job, and they're not easily placed in another job. And this is what they call friction,
Yeah.
neat
Good name.
economics word, but you have to deal with it. If you're going to say we're going to allow imports of Korean automobiles, what impact is that going to have on the domestic automobile industry here?
But on the flip side of that, I think China is the biggest buyer of GM products and Ford. So let's talk a little bit about the TARP program because that basically was one of the first measures taken under the end of George Bush's term, right, the last couple months.
Yeah.
And what that program did.